Okay, so I'm with my uncle from Italy, Italian heritage. So the first question I have was, what first brought you or your parents to Canada?
In the 50s, after the war, my parents worked in a restaurant. My family has a restaurant, still has to this day, a restaurant in Rome.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever knew that.
No, I didn't.
It's a family restaurant, so everybody worked there, and it was not in the tourist area of Rome, but just outside in the residential area, but right in Rome itself. And
Okay.
so they worked there. And after the war, Italy was in bad shape. And you're talking about, late 40s, early 50s. And they wanted to immigrate. We had an uncle here that already lived in Montreal, funny enough, and he was responsible for sponsoring everybody to come over. Everybody being my mother and her three other sisters were sort of the primary immigrants, and their husbands to come to Canada, to Toronto. So that was 1950, early 50s, and I was born in Toronto in 1955.
Okay. So how old were your parents when they immigrated to Canada?
My parents were in their late 40s, I guess, or late 30s. And because I believe my mother had me when she was 40, which back in those days was a little bit late.
Yes.
So I was the smallest of a bunch of cousins. So all my cousins were 7, 8, 9 years older than I was, and they all immigrated. They were all born in Italy and came over as toddlers and as even teenagers, some of them. So I grew up amongst a lot of cousins that were older than me.
Yeah. How long did they stay in Italy for, like your parents?
Well, they were born in Italy, and my parents are from the east coast of Italy, the northern east coast of Italy on the Adriatic side.
Okay.
So funny enough, my father's family, the Angelonis, they had a restaurant on the east coast as well. They had a campground. They had a bit of a hotel, all set up.
Like a whole campground, like they own?
Yeah.
Okay.
That they would, in the summer, people would go and rent camp because it was right near the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my mother's side was originally from that area, but a lot of my mother's relatives moved to Rome, and that's where the restaurant started. I guess that would have been in the 40s with when that restaurant first opened, 40s, because I remember my parents would say that restaurant was open during the war, and they kind of left the bombing, again stories from the past. They left the bombing because the Vatican and all the churches and everything, they left Rome a little bit alone, but my parents and the family in that restaurant would serve they remember a lot of American soldiers, but it was 24/7, right? Morning, noon, night in the restaurant. They would sleep upstairs, live upstairs.
And then go down and then serve, right?
And work and take shifts, and it was a tough life. And when my uncle said, come on over to Canada, better opportunities, they took it. Funny story though, because when I went, my first visit back to Italy was when I was a teenager. At 17, they went back to see the family and everything, and
they brought you along, right?
And I was with them. So here I'm 17 years old in Rome, and it looked pretty cool. Like Rome by then, this is now the 60s. And by then, they had already been here for a while and in Canada. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And I learned how to visit all of the tourist spots because some of my cousins in Rome would say, okay, today you're going to go to the Vatican, take this bus. And I'd go by myself because they would be visiting. And I got to know Rome pretty well for that 2 or 3 weeks. I get back and I said, and then I visited on my dad's side, the beach and it was pretty nice. And so I get back and I said, why did you guys ever move away from all of this to come to Toronto, to Canada? So it's an interesting story. Oh, it wasn't like it is now. It was bad, during the war, after the war. All of Europe was in bad shape, right? Not a lot of work, and a lot of people were poor, and so Canada, and some immigrants went to Canada, some went to the U.S., even from our family. Some went to France. I have an uncle in France, an Angeloni, so I have cousins in France now, and I remember some of them went to Australia as well. So a lot of Europe just emigrated.
Kind of all over, yeah. Not in one spot.
Not in one spot.
Like you were saying before, why did you ever move? Do you know what that journey was like when they moved to Canada?
It's a good question, because it was tough. They didn't really know what they were getting into.
It's a big risk too.
It's a big risk.
Leaving everything behind, right?
To leave everything behind, leave a lot of your family. Although
Yes.
they were all coming over one at a time. But I remember a story of my mother. They came across on the ship, and I think it was almost winter, and then to Halifax, which is where. So they took a train from Halifax to Toronto. And my mother used to say, I cried all the way from Halifax to Toronto. Well, why did you cry, Mom? Well, because it was freezing cold compared to Europe, and the trains were like cattle cars. Because in Europe, people got around by train a lot more than in Canada, that's for sure. So the trains were a lot more, even in the 40s and the 50s, the trains were a lot more sophisticated, a lot, nicer,
design,
more comfortable, and they get here, and they were not anything like that, and the cold. So that first few weeks of landing and traveling to Toronto, and then setting up in Toronto, it was a hardship. It wasn't easy.
What do you remember about your parents' first impression of Canada? And did you encounter any obstacles, or did they encounter any obstacles when they were coming over?
The first obstacle, I think, would be language, of course.
Yeah, language
because
barrier.
they did not know Italian or English, but there were a lot of Italian immigrants, so they kind of stuck together. We lived at St. Clair and Dufferin in Toronto, which was kind of the Little Italy of the time. So there were a lot of neighbors and some families, some relatives. So they stuck together, and they all got jobs. My dad got a job unloading trucks for Loblaws back then, and he had his brother here by then, and so they worked together, and so they stuck together, very community oriented, partly because of the language and the culture. And then there was a large number of Italian immigrants in Toronto back then, and I grew up amongst those. So it wasn't easy. We lived 2 families to a house, one family downstairs, one family upstairs. And I guess they rented back then, and until we were able to afford a new house and move out of there into the suburbs, which was then by the 60s, because I went to school. My first school was grade 1, and that would have been St. Mary's of the Angels, which was at St. Clair and Dufferin.
Yeah.
So that was tough for them to get going and to get set up. And again, another relative worked in the garment district, which was big in Toronto, downtown Toronto, and so my mom got a job with her sister, again very family oriented, in the textile industry, making drapes. So they worked there in that same place, my mom and her twin sister. They worked there from the time they got here in Canada in the 50s till they retired. That was like 20, 25 years or however long that was.
Yeah.
And they worked at that same place. My dad went from Loblaws unloading trucks, then he went to work for the school board. At night shift as a caretaker. And then he made his way through the ranks and became the head caretaker of a Catholic school in Toronto, downtown Toronto, and that's where he stayed till retirement. So, union job, good wages, and then we had already moved to the suburbs. And they, overcame the challenges culturally and financially, and they stuck together. Church had a, somewhat large part to do with it. So it was, I had no complaints. I didn't really suffer much or experience any of their hardships because I was born at the right time, I guess, and I had all these older cousins around me as well, looking after me and making sure I got to school and all that. So it was good. A challenge, but good.
Is there any items that are significant that that you brought back that you still have, like photographs or heirlooms, anything like that?
Aside from a few stray photographs of basically just family parties in Italy, they didn't bring back any artifacts. I think, traveling with anything. I mean, they lived in Rome for several years before coming here.
Yeah.
And so the old town artifacts, they didn't have any of those. So other than photographs, there weren't a lot of heirlooms or anything of cultural significance, unfortunately.
When they were immigrating, there's probably not much they could bring either, right?
That's right.
Just themselves.
Exactly.
Did you exchange letters with relatives in Italy?
I myself didn't, because again, I wasn't close to them. Even when I started, when I went to visit, and then I was going back and forth after I got married. We went and visited relatives, but we didn't really keep that much in time until social media. And then I found that as I got older, and my older aunts and uncles in Italy, some of them still in that restaurant, they would begin using Facebook, and which was funny.
Yeah.
And so you'd see the odd post that way, but there wasn't a lot of ongoing connection with the old country and with my older relatives, which was unfortunate. But I mean, and my parents, the odd phone call and.
But no, like letters from your parents, any of that? No, not really, right?
Not significantly. They weren't big letter writers, that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So, where, like, do you know the exact town where they were from?
The town that both my parents and a lot of other family were born and grew up in is called La Cerasa, which means cherry. Or I guess it means cherry or rose. One or the other.
I think it's cherry, yeah.
I think it's cherry, right? And so I've been back to the old town. I have a picture of me standing a few years ago in front of the Cerasa sign. And but again, those small towns in Italy, not just in our region of the country, but a lot of small towns are shrinking because people move to the bigger cities where there's work and for school and then careers. So you find a lot of those small towns are half empty.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because a lot of those family homes are still there and people go back and visit. We never really did, but it's funny how culture changes and time just changes. It's, that's where the work is in the bigger cities.
Looking back, do you think there's anything different your parents could have done at the time?
I don't know if they ever regretted or any decisions that they made, even starting from to come here in the first place, or any decisions, career, home. Once they got here, they just went with the flow, and it was all about, they couldn't afford very much, grew up, fairly modest upbringing, and when my dad got the union job for the school board, that was a big boost in income, and they were by then a lot more stable. My mom still kept working,
yeah,
and my grandmother would, in the early days, my grandmother would take care of me and a couple of my smaller cousins, and so I really learned how to speak Italian as before I even spoke English. Kind of learned them both at the same time, because you have the aunts and uncles and my parents and my grandmother speaking Italian, and then friends and younger cousins or older cousins would speak English. So you grew up learning both languages.
It's probably the best way to do it too, because
comes even to this day. It comes naturally to me, and but again, a lot of the old old family is passed away. My parents and aunts and uncles, so there's not a lot of people that I can speak Italian to. Some of my cousins, even younger than me and older, we try to communicate in Italian, but English is the primary language.
Is there, have you noticed that your Italian's gone worse over the years just because you haven't been using it as much?
I do.
Okay.
But here's a funny thing about that is when I do go back and visit, I've been last time I was there was 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay.
And you go and you start talking to my relatives, and it comes back to you. The more you use it, the more it comes words, and then you hear conversations, and you pick up on things, and it comes back to you. Slowly but surely, it's not lost. But I can see that if you don't use it, you lose it. Practice makes perfect, and language is one of those things.
So you're in the baby boomer, I believe, right?
I'm a baby boomer.
46 to 64, yeah.
Yeah.
And then your parents were GI generation?
I don't know what actually my parents' generation would even be called.
Just says over 80.
And what is it? GI?
GI generation.
That would be them.
Okay.
That would be them.
Anything else you'd like to add? Like any stories or anything like that?
No, the funny story was, why did you guys ever come here?
Yeah.
Italy is so beautiful, and the culture is so
everything
rich
about it, yeah.
and of
Food,
course the food, and we
scenery.
grew up eating and eating Italian cuisine. But other than that, the story of my mom crying all the way to Toronto, that always struck me.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think overall, I don't think they ever regretted coming. They had their immediate family. My mom had her sisters. My dad had a brother, and of course then all the nieces and nephews, and for me cousins. And it was a good upbringing, and with no major challenges. I see some of the immigrants. I see some of the immigrants coming today that have more of a cultural challenge of adapting than we had back then.
I would say, just because there's not a huge war going on, it's a little bit easier for them to immigrate, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. There's not a lot of military activities going on, so immigrating. But the number of immigrants has dropped dramatically. And even back in those days, we were from sort of the central northern part of Italy, whereas most of the immigrants back in the 50s
Sicily
were southern Italians.
Yeah.
Sicily, Calabria. They were more agricultural communities, whereas the more developed and industrial parts of Italy, they didn't tend to immigrate as much as the southern Italians did.
So do you think if your parents were from those more sophisticated, not sophisticated, but more developed places in Italy, do you think they would have still came to Canada?
Yeah, I think that might have happened for example, if my dad had a, better work. That restaurant, although is great and is still there today.
Yeah.
That restaurant was even though it was a great business for the family. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work during the war, and it was a lot of work after the war. As my parents would always say, morning, noon, and night, you're working.
Yeah.
And you're working shifts, you're sharing, the profits of the restaurant with the family.
Exactly.
There's 3 or 4 brothers and sisters that ran the factory, my parents included. So it was I don't know if I would have been able to make that decision to immigrate, as many people had to make that tough decision back then.
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
Like you were saying before, when I was in Italy 3 years ago.
That's right.
I noticed the train system was really nice there. It wasn't too expensive either, and you could it was really easy to travel compared to here.
Yeah.
Here's a little bit if you have a car, it's easier, but so a lot of people don't have cars nowadays, and it's hard for them to get around, right?
Yeah.
It's expensive too.
It's a different culture. Everything is much more closer together.
Yeah.
Another story of my uncle that came to visit actually for our wedding. My uncle and his son, and we took him around Toronto, the usual sights, the CN Tower, and we got to Lakeshore, and we looked out over Lake Ontario, and he said, "But this is not a lake, this is an ocean," because it's the Great Lakes, they're huge, and you don't have lakes that size anywhere in Europe.
No.
That's why we call them the Great Lakes here. So I remember that, and certain things stick with you as you get older. And now every time I go downtown or I go to,
You remember?
I remember what my uncle said. This is not a lake. This is an ocean. And then of course you see the ferry going back and forth to the island.
Yeah.
And interesting stuff.
I know you kind of answered some of these already, but
Okay.
do you identify with cultural background and heritage, and describe your heritage?
I
transition?
grew up as a Canadian Italian.
Yeah.
To this day, you know, my last name, Angeloni, Robert Angeloni, people identify, you know, clients now and in business, you know that my culture and my history is Italian based.
Yeah.
And I never forgot it, never tried to hide it or anything. It's just who I am. I'm Italian Canadian.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing, and I have many friends and clients and that are, you know, Greek Canadian or French Canadian. So you kind of hang on. I think more so than in a lot of other places, because in particular Canada, in particular Toronto, is so multicultural that everyone has a cultural background almost.
Yeah.
So.
Did your grandparents ever emigrate or no?
Just my grandma.
Okay.
And she stayed with us and helped raise me and as a baby and as a toddler while everyone had to go to work.
Yeah,
including my mom. Yeah. So my grandmother stayed and she was responsible for that initial, you know, language and culture and customs. And, you know, she died when I was pretty young, but always, you know, the pictures reveal and bring back memories.
So, when you grew up, where was it just like, do they just speak Italian at home, or like how did you learn English as well?
It primarily Italian as I was growing up, but then you go out and play with other kids and you learn English.
Especially in Canada,
Especially in Canada, yeah. This is even before going to school. So by the time, and I didn't go to kindergarten. I don't even remember if they had kindergarten back then. So grade 1, you have to know English, right?
Yeah.
So by the time you're 6, you're fluent in both languages, which is always kind of cool. And I try and keep it up.
Yeah. Did you grow up or live currently within an ethnic community of your own heritage? Or a different heritage?
In those first years was primarily an Italian neighborhood, Italian immigrant neighborhood. That St. Clair and Dufferin area was, and you know, when people come over, they tend to stick together. There was the Greek neighborhood as well, but you know, we kind of
stuck with the Italians.
Yeah, we stuck with the Italians. The Greeks stuck with the Greeks, and but we would intermingle. And then when you went to school, of course, you went to school with all different kinds. A lot of British as well, and Irish. There were a lot of Irish. I remember growing up in Toronto at that same period. It seemed like the Irish and the Italians were the biggest subculture, if you want to call it a subculture.
Did they get along with each other?
They got along, absolutely, because you stick together, especially during hard times, trying to find work. And I remember some of my cousins coming over. They had to, as teenagers or as 12 and 13-year-olds, they had to learn the language and go to school at the same time. They had a bit more of a significantly greater challenge, now that I think of it, than I did. Because by the time I went to school, I spoke English
and Italian
and Italian, and they had to learn. So I remember stories, and they'll tell me to this day. You're getting a little bit bullied as the Italians and the slang words and all of that, and it was tough going for some of them who are now senior citizens pretty much. So yeah, there were good times and bad times, but I remember they had it tougher than I did, that's for sure. So I was kind of born in that sweet spot of
right after the war.
Right after the war, and not born in Italy, born here, and yeah, that kind of thing.
All right, I have no more questions. If there's any last things you'd like to add, and then yeah.
No, I think in terms of, I'm not quite sure what the objective of the assignment is, but if I can help with anything, let me know.
Okay, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.